Yo, what's up everyone and welcome back to Boxmining. Today we're taking a look at the blockchain Vite, and that means fast in French. And every time I hear that, I imagine a French driver stuck in traffic saying, Vite, vite, putain la merde. Okay, bad jokes aside, after looking at Vite, what I found are two main features. One, as the name would suggest, is that it's fast. Okay, a lot of blockchains are doing that, fast transactions. But the second is free transactions, which is much more eyebrow raising. It's much more special because especially in the smart contract space, we have to pay for transactions. Like on Ethereum, we got to pay a little bit of gas. So we got to have a little bit of ETH around. And if you don't, well, tough luck. And in other blockchains like EOS, you got to stake a little bit of EOS. So you got to create that account. There's a barrier to entry. What Vite has over here and what's special about them is that you don't have to pay for transactions. The average user pays zero for transactions, which is something that's not really seen before and is only possible with the way they implemented their blockchain, which is technically not a blockchain, but a directed acyclic graph. In this video, we're going to start by looking at the basic Vite transaction, just showing that demo of it working so you can get everything clear in your head. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the DAG structure, how it works, advantages, disadvantages, and how they kind of improve upon the DAG structure. And then we'll talk about the first use case of Vite, which is Vitex, their decentralized exchange. We'll actually see and interview Richard Yang, one of the co-founders, about how it works and why it's one of the truly decentralized exchanges out there. This video is sponsored by Vite, so thank you very much, Vite, for sponsoring this channel. It really helps this channel grow. So the easiest way I found to understand something is to see it in action. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here, which is to show a Vite transaction in action. Now, what I have here are two mobile phones. One of these, this is the iPhone, and it's projected right here as well. So you're going to see that right now it does have some Vite. It has 10 Vite in this wallet. And this phone over here is empty. So zoom up over here. It's empty. It's got nothing in it. So I want to just send something simple. I'm going to be cheap and send one Vite to myself. Done. Sending. So what you see here is a mini delay. You can actually see if you're kind of zooming close enough, it was saying it's doing a proof of work in action. So what's special about that transaction is you can see that on this phone, I have 9 Vite, and on here, I have 1 Vite. So there was no transaction fee. It adds up to 10, which is what I started off with. This is actually really important if you're a new person coming into crypto. Because let's say you're on your mobile phone and you just got some basic attention token sent to you. BAT is a token on Ethereum. So if you want to transfer that, you have to pay gas fees, which is based on Ethereum. And then that means you need a little bit of ETH as well. So you need both ETH and BAT in order for BAT to practically function. Now, new users, if they don't have any ETH, then they can't do this. Obviously, other platforms have tried to solve this problem, like, for example, EOS. So EOS transaction fees are free, but you must stake. And this is where it's hard, because where do you get that EOS in the first place? Now, if you understand public blockchains, having a little bit of transaction fee is almost always necessary, because you need to prevent the network from spam. What stops a hacker sending out trillions of transactions per second and just clogging up the network? Now, Vite solves this issue in a creative fashion, because if you're a new user, then you can just do that little proof of work. So you just use your processor, do a calculation to prove that you are a real person. But it's not very expensive to you. It doesn't cost you any coin, but rather costs computational power, which you readily have, so long as you have a smartphone or computer this is what you have by default. Now, Vite also has a staking option where you stake Vite, and this is for advanced users. Why it makes sense is because if advanced users want more transactions, they want a larger quota, and they don't want to pay that proof of work, they just want lots of transactions per second, then they can stake on the public blockchain to gain quota. So in essence, they still get free transactions, but they must kind of hold and stake Vite, which is a kind of a commitment to the platform if you consider it that way. So that's the kind of the two options that Vite provides. For new users, you get absolutely free transactions in terms of coins. You pay a little bit in terms of computational power. If you don't want to pay for that power, you want more quota, then you can stake Vite for that. Now that we know that Vite is different, we need to take a look behind the hood to see why it is different. Now, here we're going to look a little bit closer at how Vite actually works, the underlying principles behind it. And if you remember from the start of the video, I said Vite is not a blockchain. It's a DAG. And DAGs function very, very differently from blockchains. You see, normally with a blockchain, what happens is that for a transaction to take place, it gets announced to the network, and it gets packed into blocks. So these are little transactions, and this is a new block being formed. Now, what happens is that if you want to make sure that this transaction really is kind of cemented in stone, it has protections behind it, you typically wait 3 confirmations. This is what happens on Bitcoin. This is why on exchanges it says waiting those confirmations. And that's when future blocks add security to your blockchain. So here what I have is you have those 1, 2, 3 confirmations. And typically that is around 30-minute wait time for Bitcoin. So this is why Bitcoin takes a lot of time to transfer it, to do it for how it works. But the way that this works is also very elegant because everything is done in a very linear fashion. It's very easy to traverse the blockchain to see which transactions have been spent and which haven't been spent. Now let's draw what happens with a DAG. So with a DAG, it's a little bit different. Every account has its own blockchain. So every person is their own blockchain. And let's say, for example, this is me. This is a dApp. Let's say it's a DEX. This is a DEX. And this transaction takes place. The DAG immediately writes on both our blockchains that this has taken place. But you really only need me and the DEX for this to happen. You don't really need to globally update anything because it's really just me and the DAG, the DEX. And you can keep on doing this. You can make another transaction, boom, boom, confirm. Everyone just creates your own block, boom, gets updated and continues forward. What's also interesting is that if other users interact with that dApp, with that decentralized exchange, it doesn't really have to involve me. So the same funds that's on the DEX chain can be moved to another user, and my kind of blockchain doesn't have to be upgraded or updated. Now, this kind of structure looks a lot more complicated. Like it has each individual blockchain, everyone has their own, and there are certain strong advantages and disadvantages. The first advantage is very clear. You can scale this horizontally. So every time a new user is added, just add these new users, they become their own blockchain, they add to the network. And new users don't overwhelm the network the same way Bitcoin does. So it allows for higher scalability. And a second advantage is also to do with these transactions you see here, which is that you don't have to wait for a global confirmation time. That's why Vite is fast, because once these two blockchains agree and then they can create their next block, it's done. And it doesn't take a very long time. Now, the next part is what are the weaknesses of such a system? Because obviously, with every new technology comes strengths and weaknesses. The first one I would say is that because the structure is very different from blockchain, it's harder to traverse, and it needs a little bit more time to prove that a DAG system like this can maintain a kind of a solid network over a long period of time. Bitcoin blockchain itself has 10 years of proof that it works, it's functional. And this type of system, it would take a few years for that full validation kind of practical validation to take place. Now, the other interesting disadvantage comes when there's a lot of transactions going on. So if potentially there's a huge amount of transactions between me here or maybe this one at the same time, now transaction order becomes very important because it could be a potential vulnerability where users send and try to double spend that same transaction and broadcast it at different times around the world. And because the world has a finite network latency, there's always a travel time for that communication, then there's a possibility that the order of transaction that's being kept around the network could potentially be different. This could be called an unintentional fork. So a disagreement between various nodes on the network over the order of a transaction. And the way the Vite really deals with this is by applying a snapshot. So over time, it applies this universal global snapshot of what's really going on. And then this happens quite frequently throughout the day. So it's constantly taking like very much like pictures of the entire blockchain. Snap, snap, snap. And these provide reference points in the event of disagreements between nodes over the order of a transaction. So this provides additional security and stability. Now that you know that various snapshots have really been taken of a transaction, you can say, yeah, I really do have that coin, and I do have the security that blockchain provides, a blockchain system provides, rather than a DAG system. So if you really look at what's happening with these snapshots, is that these snapshots are provided by snapshot block producers. These are voted in candidates. So you can actually see the candidates here, and you can vote for them. Very much the same way how you would vote in EOS for a block producer. Here you're voting for the snapshot block producers. And these snapshot block producers provide that security to the blockchain. Next up, we're going to look at the ecosystem of dApps. So I did say this is a smart contract platform. So it supports the execution of code, it supports smart contracts, supports the creation of decentralized applications. Now, the first application for Vite is really the decentralized exchange called Vitex. This is actually built by the team at Vite. To find out a little bit more about the decentralized exchange, I talked to Richard, the COO of Vite, and we explore in detail about how this is more decentralized, especially in terms of order matching and order execution than other decentralized exchanges out there. So to find a little bit more about the decentralized exchange that's being built on Vite, we're talking to COO Richard, and he's going to talk about why they're deciding to do a DEX in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So it's great to be here, Michael. Thanks for having me. So I think one thing to explain here is the key difference between decentralized exchange and centralized exchange. So centralized exchanges can get hacked, and sometimes you don't even know if they're hacked internally or by someone else. Binance can say they got hacked and lost 4,000 coins. You don't know who did it internally or externally. And anyway, so like as long as someone else has your money, has custody of your assets, it's a huge problem. And that's where decentralized exchange comes in, because decentralized exchanges do not have your assets. That's the key, right? They do not own anything. You are self-sovereign. And the truth is that decentralized exchanges out there are not truly decentralized exchanges, right? And I'll quickly explain why. So we basically looked at all these different decentralized exchanges and identified a few problems. So number one is the different components of the exchange. Are they decentralized or not? And one very key component is called the matching engine, which is basically the program that takes two orders and match them and execute them. And because the underlying chain for these decentralized exchanges, they simply cannot have the sort of performance that allow the matching to happen on an on-chain basis. They're not decentralized. That process is taken off-chain. So they do everything else on-chain, but this part they do off-chain. That's one problem. Another problem we noticed about decentralized exchanges is fees, right? So like to give you an example, the Binance DEX, which sort of made waves not too long ago, they charge people money even when trades do not go through. So if I were to put in an order and I change my mind, I cancel my order, oops, I pay some fees. So that's how they operate. And we basically identified these two issues and found a way to solve both problems. And we basically hit two birds with one stone. And that's what the Vitex or Vite decentralized exchange is all about. So number one, we have an on-chain matching engine, which makes us completely decentralized. We absolutely touch no part of your order. The entire assets are entirely in your custody. So you have sovereign full control of the trading process. And on the other hand, there are no fees unless the orders go through. So if you put in an order, change your mind, or you enter an order and it simply doesn't execute for whatever reason, there's no fees. So we basically were able to do this because of the underlying chain, Vite. Vite is a fast public blockchain with free transactions. And thanks to its performance, we're able to create the decentralized exchange on top of this technology.
So you also have a new coin associated with called VX. So can you tell me what's the logic behind that and why you have this coin?
So absolutely. VX is created to foster the community growth of the Vitex ecosystem. So it has many benefits for anyone participating in the development of this ecosystem, and I'll explain later. But the whole point is that because this decentralized exchange concept has not been truly decentralized, and we feel that we are perhaps, as far as we know, the first truly decentralized exchange. We really want everybody to know about this. We want everybody to start using it. And we want this to be the beginning of the evolution of really, really decentralizing the financial process and decentralizing the financial aspect of people's lives. And so one interesting mechanism or game theory or tokenomics, whatever term you want to use, is that we invented this token, right? And then the way this token works is that as long as you hold this token, you will be entitled to proceeds from this exchange. And this token, currently there's no private sale, no public sale. The only way you can obtain the token is through interaction with the DEX, right? And there's 5 ways in total. Number one, you can trade on the DEX, and as long as you execute a trade, you get some VX. You can list a trading pair on the DEX, and if you contribute to the total amount of tokens that can be traded on the exchange, you get some VX. You can stake. So what that means is that this DEX is a giant smart contract, right? And you need to stake the underlying chain's token, which is Vite, in order to contribute to the quota used to facilitate transactions on the exchange. And if you stake, you also get VX. If you make markets on the exchange, so if you provide liquidity by putting in some limit orders, as long as a qualifying limit order is sufficiently close to the bid-offer spread, you also get VX. And lastly, if you do referrals, right? If you get someone else to also try the exchange, you also get VX. So these are the different ways you can get VX, and we really think that this is a great mechanism to help the community grow. And by the way, so as I mentioned earlier, there's no private sale, there's no public sale. So the team is entitled to this full disclaimer. The development team is entitled to 10% of the VX, but their share is being released at the same time as VX is being distributed to everyone else. There's zero inflation, and the VX will be fully distributed within 2 years' time. So we really think this is a great mechanism to help the community grow and help us spread this true decentralized exchange to as many traders as possible.
So what are the concluding thoughts to this after looking at everything with their decentralized exchange, with their kind of launching the transaction? What do I overall think about Vite? What are the strengths, and also what are the weaknesses? For strengths, having no transaction cost is really important. There is kind of no strings attached to this too. You don't have to create your own account, which costs money, like in the case of EOS, nor do we need the underlying asset to pay for gas or a separate token to pay for gas. This means that any dApp developer, they can create their own tokens, use any stable tokens, whatnot, and allow users to freely transfer those tokens without any visible fees. At the end of the day, it's how dApps should work. Users expect to be able to transfer various point systems and whatnot without paying fees or keeping other currencies. That's just basic. And this really shows itself when it comes to the DEX, because if you cancel a transaction, you don't have to pay a fee, which is what you expect to do. Now, in terms of using the DEX myself, I found the gateway process to be tolerable, the cross-chain process, getting Ethereum onto it, using the gateway. I feel it's not too bad. Just understanding it, everything's built into one mobile app. I do have to say though, just when using the mobile app and then using the DEX itself, I did have to kind of approve transactions, and that's a little bit annoying. I have to say that's pretty much almost in every DEX that you have to do so. It just doesn't feel as streamlined as just clicking a button to execute an order once you're logged in. That would be easier. But anyways, as a start, I think it's valid. It's usable, but still not as clean as a centralized exchange that we have now, and I hope to see some improvements there. Now, in terms of the blockchain itself, because it uses the directed acyclic graph, the DAG, I do say it's a lot more experimental than kind of more stable blockchains, proven blockchains out there. So it does need a little bit more time to prove itself that this is valid, especially at times of congestion when it's being stress tested. Right now, the network is in the pre-mainnet stage, so it's kind of like beginning the test, I would say. Like every transaction that happens now is final. It's what's going to happen on the mainnet, but they're still leaving room to kind of debug this and improve it. And because it's in that pre-mainnet stage, you have to also be careful. There's two versions of the Vite token. One is the native pre-mainnet token, and it starts off with Vite _, or the ERC20 token that's tradable on some exchanges. If you're confused, just look at the withdrawal or deposit address to see if it starts with 0x or Vite. And if you do that transfer, there's always the option of transferring onto your wallet to do the one-way conversion from the ERC20 version to the pre-mainnet version. If you're interested in checking out Vite, check out the wallet first. I think that's one of the best ways to just check out how transactions work, check out the network, check out the decentralized exchange. There's also a referral code down below. And also, if you use the DEX, do tell me if it works well or not, because I'm very interested to see how development of these DEXs go and when it would overtake a centralized exchange. So guys, that's my take on Vite. Leave a comment down below on what you think, how you experimented. I'd love to hear what your experience is like. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you next time.